The ocean has always called to me. It's the kind of pull that feels less like curiosity and more like destiny, a siren's call, if you will. Growing up in a small coastal town, I learned to respect the sea's power, but I was also enchanted by its mystery. So, when I landed a job as a marine researcher aboard a vessel dedicated to exploring uncharted waters, it felt like I was answering that call. The expedition started like any other. We were about 150 miles offshore, above a section of the continental shelf rarely visited, let alone studied. The sea here was calm but endless, a mirror reflecting a cloudless sky. Below us, however, was a trench so deep it barely had a name on the maps. That evening, after a day of uneventful sonar readings, I found myself alone on the deck. Most of the crew were either asleep or busy with data analysis, but I needed air. The sky was ink black, the stars scattered like shattered glass. The water was still, too still, as if the ocean were holding its breath. And then I heard it. A melody floated up from the depths, faint but unmistakable. It was haunting, beautiful, and utterly alien. It sounded like a woman's voice, though it was layered, almost harmonic, as if a choir were singing underwater. I froze, my heart pounding. I thought it might be the wind playing tricks on me, but there was no wind. I leaned over the rail, straining to listen. The song grew louder, yet the water remained undisturbed. No ripples, no fish breaking the surface, nothing. Just that sound. "Is someone out there?" I whispered, half expecting an answer. A flash of light caught my eye, a soft, ethereal glow rising from the depths. It pulsed gently, in rhythm with the melody. I called for the others, my voice breaking the stillness. But before anyone could join me, the light faded, the song ceased, and the ocean returned to its eerie silence. When the crew arrived moments later, there was nothing to see, nothing to hear. Just me, wide-eyed and trembling, trying to convince them that I wasn't imagining things. "You've been out here too long," one of them joked, clapping me on the back. The sea plays tricks on people. But I knew what I'd heard, and I knew I had to hear it again. That night, as the ship rocked gently on the waves, I lay awake in my bunk, ears straining for the melody that had burrowed into my mind. The ocean had called to me my whole life. Now, I was beginning to understand why. The song returned the next night. I had stayed on deck longer than usual, my eyes scanning the endless expanse of water for any sign of the glow. The air was thick, humid, and eerily still. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. Then it came again, faint and melodic, rising from the depths like a whisper meant only for me. This time, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a handheld searchlight and aimed it over the railing, sweeping it across the surface of the water. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but empty waves. But the song grew louder, more insistent, like it wanted me to follow. "Hello?" My voice trembled as I leaned over the edge. "Is someone there?" And that's when I saw them. Two pale orbs, glowing faintly beneath the surface, staring up at me. They weren't like any fish or marine life I'd ever seen. They were large, almost human, but unblinking and unnervingly steady. I froze, the searchlight trembling in my hands as the glowing eyes moved closer, breaking through the shadows of the deep. The song grew louder, enveloping me like a warm embrace. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was in my head, vibrating through my chest, pulling me closer. I leaned so far over the rail that the rough metal pressed into my stomach, my body acting on its own as if drawn by invisible threads. The eyes rose closer to the surface, and for a fleeting moment I thought I saw a face. Smooth, pale, and inhumanly beautiful. Then a hand. No, a fin. No, something in between, reached out of the water. It was delicate, almost translucent, and covered in shimmering scales that caught the faint moonlight. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest. The searchlight clattered to the deck as I grabbed the rail to steady myself. The glow and the song vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving me alone in the oppressive silence of the night. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those unblinking orbs, felt the pull of the song. I didn't know what I had seen, what I had almost touched, but it wasn't natural. The next morning, I tried to explain what had happened to the crew, but the words felt hollow, ridiculous even, when spoken aloud. Glowing eyes? A hand from the water? A song that could control me? "You're just tired," the captain said, frowning as he adjusted his cap. "Take the day off. You've been working too hard." I wanted to argue, but I could see the disbelief in their eyes. No one would believe me. As the day wore on, I found myself wandering back to the rail, staring out over the endless blue. I didn't want to see it again. Not really. But deep down, a part of me knew I couldn't stay away. The ocean wasn't just calling to me anymore. It had seen me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting for me to come back. The song haunted me, even in the daylight. It wasn't just a melody anymore. It was a compulsion, an ache deep within my chest that refused to be ignored. The ocean seemed to know. Every wave, every ripple against the ship's hull felt like a taunt, a reminder that I hadn't gone far enough. I tried to distract myself by reviewing sonar readings and data from the expedition. Nothing unusual, just empty trench walls, scattered schools of fish, and the occasional passing shadow. But the ordinary details felt hollow, meaningless compared to what I had seen and felt. That night, as the crew settled into their bunks, I made a decision I knew was reckless. I needed to go back. I needed to see those eyes again. I waited until the ship was quiet, the only sound, the gentle lapping of water against the hull. I grabbed a flashlight and a rope, tying it securely around the railing. I wasn't planning to dive in, just get closer. The moment I stepped out onto the deck, the song began. This time, it was clearer, more vibrant, as if it had been waiting for me. I leaned over the rail, shining my flashlight into the water. For a long moment there was nothing. Then they appeared. The glowing eyes emerged from the depths, just as they had the night before. But this time, they didn't stop. The face followed, smooth and luminescent, framed by long, flowing hair that drifted like seaweed. Her features were both beautiful and alien. Her lips curved into a smile that seemed to see straight through me. The song grew louder, and I felt my grip on the rail loosen. It wasn't fear that paralyzed me. It was desire. A deep, unrelenting pull that made every rational thought feel insignificant. Come closer, the song seemed to say, though the words were never spoken aloud. Her hand, delicate, shimmering, and impossibly graceful, reached out again, just above the surface of the water. My breath caught as I saw her body emerge slightly, a form that was both human and otherworldly, with scales that glowed faintly in the moonlight. I leaned further over the rail, the rope digging into my waist. My fingers hovered inches from hers, and in that moment, I wanted nothing more than to touch her. Don't. The voice was sharp, cutting through the song like a knife. I spun around, startled, and saw one of the crew members standing at the door to the cabin, his face pale and his eyes wide. "What are you doing?" he demanded, rushing over and pulling me back from the edge. The song faltered, the glow dimming, and when I turned back, she was gone. "I saw her," I stammered, my voice shaking. "She was right there." "Stay away from the water," he said, his grip on my arm tight. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." I tried to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't disbelief, it was fear. He knew something he wasn't telling me. That night, as I lay in my bunk, the ache in my chest grew unbearable. The memory of her eyes, her song, her touch lingered, burning brighter than ever. And I knew I wouldn't be able to resist for much longer. I lasted 2 more nights. The crew began avoiding me. I caught their glances, the hushed whispers that ceased when I entered a room. Even the captain seemed uneasy, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by tense silence whenever I passed by. They didn't understand. How could they? The ocean had taken hold of me. The song returned on the 3rd night, stronger than ever. It wrapped around me, pulling at my heart, my mind, my very soul. I couldn't fight it anymore. I didn't want to. I didn't bother with the rope or the flashlight this time. I walked onto the deck, my footsteps heavy but purposeful. The air was thick with the scent of salt, the night unusually calm. The water shimmered faintly beneath the moonlight, as if waiting for me. And then she rose. Her face was more vivid than I remembered, her eyes burning with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Her song swelled, filling the air, drowning out every other thought. She was beautiful, terrifying, perfect. "Come," the song whispered, not in words but in emotion, in an undeniable pull that coursed through me. I climbed over the railing, my bare feet balancing precariously on the edge. The cold night air bit at my skin, but it didn't matter. All I could see was her. Then I heard it, a scream. It wasn't part of her song, it was human, raw and filled with terror. I turned my head and saw the crew gathered at the edge of the deck, shouting, their faces twisted in fear. But their voices didn't reach me. Nothing could. I let go. The water was freezing, a shocking contrast to the warmth of her presence. The waves closed over my head, and for a moment I was weightless, surrounded by silence. Then she was there, her glowing eyes inches from mine, her hands cradling my face. She smiled, and the warmth returned, spreading through my body like a soothing balm. I reached for her, my fingers brushing against her scaled skin, and felt a strange sense of belonging. But then the warmth changed. It burned. Her grip tightened, her nails digging into my skin. Her smile widened, revealing sharp, glinting teeth. The song twisted into something darker, more primal. I tried to pull away, but it was too late. Her eyes bore into mine, and I saw everything, the countless souls she had lured into the depths, the endless void where they were trapped, screaming silently in the dark. I was one of them now. The pain was unbearable, yet I couldn't scream. My lungs filled with water as her song consumed me, tearing away everything I was. My last thought, as the world faded into cold darkness, was that I had willingly answered her call. And that was the price of listening. Exploration of the Mariana Trench had always been my dream. It wasn't just the science or the adventure, it was the mystery. The trench was a black hole of knowledge, a realm untouched by human hands, holding secrets older than the Earth itself. When I was offered a spot on the crew of the Abyssal Voyager, I didn't hesitate. The submersible was state-of-the-art, equipped with technology designed to withstand the crushing pressure of the deepest parts of the ocean. Our mission was straightforward: descend into the trench, collect data, and return with discoveries that would revolutionize our understanding of the ocean's depths. The first few days were uneventful. The water outside our portholes grew darker and darker until it was pitch black, save for the beams of our floodlights slicing through the void. Occasionally, we caught glimpses of strange creatures, bioluminescent shapes drifting like ghostly apparitions in the abyss. Then we went deeper. It wasn't on the charts. The trench's maps showed nothing beyond a certain depth, but our sonar detected a chasm, a yawning void plunging further into the earth than anyone thought possible. The excitement among the crew was palpable, uncharted territory. "Let's go," the captain said, his voice steady but tinged with a thrill he couldn't hide. We descended into the abyss, the pressure outside the hull a constant, oppressive presence. The floodlights struggled against the darkness, revealing only fleeting glimpses of jagged rock walls and strange, unearthly creatures that darted away before we could fully see them. Then the sonar picked up something. It was massive, a shadow that appeared and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At first, we thought it was a glitch, a false reading caused by the uneven walls of the trench. But then it happened again, and again. The shadow wasn't stationary. It was moving. "Probably a whale," one of the scientists muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Not at this depth," the captain replied, his eyes fixed on the sonar screen. "There's no way." The shadow reappeared, closer this time. It was difficult to gauge its size, but it dwarfed the submarine. Whatever it was enormous, and it was alive. The tension in the cabin grew thick. We turned off the floodlights, hoping to avoid attracting attention. The darkness outside became absolute, pressing against the portholes like a living thing. "Let's get out of here," the captain finally said, his voice low and grim. But before we could ascend, the shadow moved again. This time, it wasn't just on the sonar. Something scraped against the hull. The sound was low and deep, like metal dragging against stone. The submarine shuddered, and the lights flickered. Panic erupted as everyone scrambled to check the systems, shouting over one another. "What the hell was that?" One of the crew yelled. No one had an answer. Then came the noise, a low, guttural growl that reverberated through the water, through the submarine, through my very bones. And I realized, with a sinking feeling, that we weren't just exploring the abyss. We had been noticed. The submarine felt like a coffin. Every creak of the hull, every faint groan from the deep sent a shiver down my spine. After the scraping sound, the crew's nervous energy turned into outright paranoia. "We need to surface now," one of the scientists, Dr. Patel, said, his voice cracking. "Forget the mission. This isn't worth our lives." "We can't," the captain replied, his face pale but resolute. "The ascent takes hours, if it's still out there." He didn't need to finish the sentence. We all knew what he meant. Whatever was lurking in the trench, it was watching us. The submarine remained eerily quiet for the next few minutes, save for the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. We floated in the void, floodlights off, sonar pinging intermittently. Then came the first knock. It was faint at first, like a pebble tapping against glass. We all froze, exchanging wide-eyed glances. "Did you hear that?" someone whispered. Before anyone could respond, there was another knock. Louder, more deliberate. It was coming from the port side of the sub, where the darkness was absolute. "What's out there?" the navigator, Michaels, muttered, staring at the porthole as if expecting something to press its face against the glass. The captain grabbed the intercom. "Floodlights on. Full power." The light snapped on, illuminating the water outside. At first, there was nothing but empty blackness. But then something moved, a flicker at the edge of the light's reach. "What was that?" Patel asked, his voice barely audible. Nobody answered. The knocks continued, growing more insistent. It was as if something, or someone, was trying to get in. The sound echoed through the cabin, each knock vibrating through the metal walls. I moved closer to the porthole, against every instinct screaming at me to stay back. My breath fogged the glass as I peered into the murk. And then I saw it. A massive, pale shape, just outside the range of the lights. Its skin was mottled and scarred, almost translucent, and its form was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't a fish, or a whale, or anything that belonged to this world. The knocks turned into a rhythmic pounding. It wasn't random, it was deliberate, intelligent. "It's testing us," the captain said, his voice shaking for the first time. "Testing us for what?" Suddenly, the pounding stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was the kind of silence that pressed on your ears, making your own heartbeat sound deafening. "Is it gone?" someone whispered. And then, from the other side of the sub, a new sound began. A scraping, like claws dragging along metal. It moved slowly, methodically, as if circling us. The lights flickered again, and a strange, almost electronic hum filled the cabin. "We need to move," the captain barked, snapping everyone out of their terror. "Now!" The engines roared to life, and the submarine began its ascent. But as we rose, the scraping followed us, growing louder, more frenzied. I glanced at the sonar screen. The shadow was there, larger than ever, keeping pace with us. And then the knocks came again. This time, they were everywhere. From every side of the submarine. The knocks didn't stop. They grew more erratic, more insistent, echoing from every direction. It felt like being trapped inside a drum, the vibrations rattling my teeth and making my skin crawl. "Full power to the engines!" the captain shouted, gripping the controls so tightly his knuckles turned white. The abyssal Voyager groaned in protest as it surged upward, but the shadow on the sonar didn't fall behind. Whatever was outside the hull, it was keeping up with us effortlessly. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the porthole. The darkness beyond was impenetrable, the floodlights only managing to carve out a small bubble of visibility. But even within that bubble, shapes flickered and darted, always just out of focus. Then something slammed into the hull. The impact sent me sprawling to the floor, and alarms blared as the lights flickered and dimmed. The air was filled with the screech of metal, and I was certain the sub was going to crumple like a soda can under the pressure. "What the hell was that?" Michaels yelled, scrambling back to his seat. No one had an answer. The captain steadied himself and glanced at the sonar. His face went pale. "It's closer." Another impact. This one felt even more deliberate, as if whatever was out there was testing the limits of the hull. I could feel the vibrations through the floor. Each hit a reminder of just how fragile our situation was. And then, for the first time, I saw it clearly. A shape loomed out of the darkness, massive and impossible. It had the rough outline of a squid or an octopus, but its proportions were all wrong. Its tentacles were too long, too thin, twisting and curling like black smoke in the water. Its body was covered in ridges and deep scars, and its eyes, oh God, its eyes glowed faintly, like twin lanterns burning with a cold alien light. The thing was watching us, studying us. "Is that alive?" Patel whispered, his voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, one of the tentacles lashed out. It struck the floodlights, shattering the glass and plunging the area into darkness. The sub lurched again, and the lights inside flickered dangerously. "It's trying to disable us," the captain said grimly. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The captain didn't answer. He was staring at the sonar, his face set in a mask of grim determination. "We have to get to the surface. That's the only way." Another tentacle slammed into the hull, and the scraping sound returned. It was closer this time, moving along the side of the sub like nails on a chalkboard. I pressed myself against the wall, feeling the vibrations as the creature continued its assault. My breath came in short, shallow gasps, and my heart was pounding so loudly I thought it might burst. The thing outside wasn't just testing us. It was playing with us. And I had the sickening realization that we might not make it out alive. As we continued our desperate ascent, the creature followed, relentless and unyielding. Each time it struck the sub, it left deep dents in the hull, and I could feel the pressure mounting. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the porthole nearest me cracked. A spiderweb of fractures spread across the glass, and a small stream of water began to trickle in. I scrambled back, choking on a scream, as the others turned to stare in horror. The thing outside stopped moving. It floated there, its glowing eyes fixed on me through the cracked glass. And for a moment, I thought I saw something that looked like a grin. We weren't just prey. We were entertainment. The abyssal voyager groaned as the pressure around us intensified. The cracks in the porthole grew wider, and the slow trickle of water turned into a steady stream. The submarine wasn't going to hold much longer. "Seal it off," the captain barked, pointing at the emergency bulkhead. I hesitated for a moment, my gaze locked on the creature's glowing eyes staring through the fractured glass. But the captain's shout jolted me into action. I slammed the bulkhead shut, cutting off the view of the porthole and the thing outside. "Engines at full power," the captain yelled. "We're almost there." The submarine lurched forward, and for a brief moment, I thought we might make it. But then came the sound, the deep, resonant groan of something massive moving in the water. The creature wasn't done with us. The sonar screen lit up as the shadow moved, enveloping the submarine completely. The rhythmic knocking returned, but this time it was accompanied by a low, guttural hum that resonated through the walls. "What's it doing?" Patel whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum. Before anyone could answer, the submarine jolted violently, and the lights flickered. One by one, the control panels shorted out, leaving us in near darkness. "It's dragging us down," the captain said, his voice hollow. "It's pulling us back into the trench." "No," Michaels shouted, scrambling to the controls. "We're so close. We can't." Another jolt threw him to the floor, cutting off his words. The hum grew louder, vibrating through my bones, and I could feel the pressure of the water around us increasing as we descended. The hull creaked and groaned, and I could hear the faint sound of rivets popping loose. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the motion stopped. We were suspended in the water, the submarine eerily still. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hiss of water leaking through the cracks. "What's happening?" Patel asked, his voice shaking. The answer came in the form of a deep, resonant sound that filled the cabin. It wasn't the hum or the knocking, it was something else. A voice. It was low and guttural, speaking in a language I couldn't understand, but the intent was clear. It was speaking to us. To me. The creature's glowing eyes appeared again, this time outside a different porthole. They burned brighter than before, and I felt an overwhelming pressure in my head, like something was trying to burrow into my thoughts. "Get it out!" I screamed, clutching my head. The others stared at me in confusion, but I couldn't focus on their faces. The voice was inside me now, whispering secrets I didn't want to know. Images of the trench, of ancient ruins and countless bones flashed through my mind. The creature wasn't just some deep-sea predator, it was something far older, far more intelligent. And it had chosen us. The submarine jolted again, and this time, the hull began to give. Water poured in from every direction, and alarms blared as the cabin filled with the deafening roar of rushing water. "Abandon ship!" the captain shouted, but it was too late. The last thing I saw before the water engulfed me was the creature's eyes, glowing brighter than ever, and the faint hint of what could only be described as satisfaction. I don't know how long I was under, but when I woke, I wasn't in the submarine anymore. I was in the trench, and I wasn't alone. I was never supposed to be part of this expedition. A last-minute dropout left a space open, and my name came up. It wasn't just an opportunity, it was the opportunity. The Mariana Trench was a dream for any diver. Untouched by human hands, the abyss promised discovery and danger in equal measure. We were a team of 5. 2 seasoned marine biologists, Dr. Carter and Dr. Singh, a geologist named Tom, a technician, Emily, and me, a freelance diver who'd made a name for myself by exploring shipwrecks and underwater caves. But the trench was something else entirely. The mission was simple, or so they said. We were to deploy a series of sensors and collect sediment samples from depths never reached by man. A research vessel, the Oceanic Dawn, served as our base, and a custom-built submersible would carry us into the abyss. Just another dive, I told myself as I climbed into the submersible, my nerves jangling like a set of loose weights. The descent started smoothly. The submersible hummed softly, its lights cutting through the endless blue. As we descended, the water grew darker, transitioning from sapphire to inky black. At around 3,000 meters, I noticed the pressure in my ears. By 5,000 meters, the silence outside was so profound it felt oppressive. "You all right there, Alex?" Emily's voice crackled over the comms. "Yeah," I replied, though my hands were gripping the armrests tightly. "Just taking it all in." "Wait until you see the trench floor," Dr. Singh said, her voice tinged with excitement. "It's like nothing you've ever experienced." By the time we reached 8,000 meters, the lights from the submersible barely penetrated the void. The sonar pinged occasionally, revealing the topography of the trench walls, steep cliffs and jagged rocks that seemed to stretch forever. It was at 10,000 meters that the first sign of trouble appeared. The sonar picked up something unusual, an object moving. Not fast, but deliberate. It was too big to be any known marine animal, and its shape was irregular. "Is that a whale?" Tom asked, squinting at the screen. Dr. Carter shook his head. "No whale can survive at this depth, and whales don't move like that." We continued our descent, and the object disappeared from the radar, but the unease it left behind stayed. Finally, the trench floor came into view. The terrain was surreal, an endless expanse of fine sediment punctuated by bizarre, otherworldly formations. Strange bioluminescent creatures scuttled and swam, their lights casting eerie patterns on the submersible's walls. "This is it," Dr. Singh said, her voice reverent. "The final frontier." The team got to work, deploying sensors and collecting samples. I kept my eyes on the porthole, scanning the darkness for what I wasn't sure, and then I saw it, a flash of movement, too fast to be natural. "Did anyone else see that?" I asked, my voice tight. "See what?" Emily replied, not looking up from her controls. "Something moved out there. It was big." "Probably a shadow," Dr. Carter said dismissively. "Your mind's playing tricks on you." But I knew what I'd seen. Something was out there, watching us. As we finished the last of our tasks, the submersible's lights began to flicker. Emily frowned and tapped at the controls. "Must be interference," she muttered. Then, without warning, the submersible lurched to the side, throwing us against the walls. "What the hell was that?" Tom shouted, scrambling to his seat. The sonar lit up again, and this time the object was back, only now it was right below us. "It's moving," Emily said, her voice trembling, "and it's coming closer." The submersible shook violently, and a sound like metal being scraped by claws reverberated through the cabin. "Ascend now!" Dr. Carter barked. Emily powered the engines and we began to rise. But the shaking didn't stop. The scraping grew louder, more insistent, and I felt a cold dread settle over me. Whatever was out there wasn't letting us leave. And as the lights flickered again, I caught a glimpse of something massive. Something with too many eyes and too many limbs, moving in the darkness. The abyss had secrets it wasn't willing to share. The ascent was supposed to be a relief. But with every meter that separated us from the trench, the weight in my chest grew heavier. The submersible continued to shake, rattling us as if something large and insistent was brushing against its hull. The scraping sound, that bone-chilling screech, didn't stop. Emily's fingers flew over the controls, her face pale as she attempted to steady the submersible. "I can't. Something's wrong with the engines. We're stuck at 7,000 meters. Dr. Carter's voice was a sharp bark in my ear. "Try again. We need to get to the surface. Now." I could hear Dr. Singh muttering something in the background, likely some kind of field protocol, but it didn't matter. I couldn't shake the image that had flashed before me, the one I'd glimpsed in the depths. The dark form, its limbs reaching out from the void, too alien to be real. The lights flickered again. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. There it was. A soft whisper, like static on the comms, only it wasn't coming from any of us. It was a voice. Low, guttural, unintelligible. The words slithered into my mind like a parasite. I wasn't imagining it. The others must have heard it too, because the submersible went silent for a moment. Even the engines sputtered as if unsure whether to obey. Did anyone else hear that? Emily's voice was barely a whisper. I looked around, my heart racing. I heard something, I said, my voice trembling despite my attempts to sound calm. It wasn't from any of you. There's something else out there. Tom scoffed nervously. You're hearing things. Probably just the pressure messing with your mind. Let's focus on getting us out of here. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was wrong. It was like something had attached itself to us, invisible yet undeniable, creeping along with the submersible as we tried to ascend. The whispering grew louder, clearer now. Words I couldn't understand, but they were insistent, urgent, like a warning. Suddenly, the submersible lurched again. This time it felt different. It wasn't a random tremor. Something was pulling us downward. Hold on, Emily shouted, her voice cracking as she fought with the controls. The submersible dipped sharply, and I was thrown against the seat, the impact jarring. I could hear the team's panicked breaths over the comms, but they sounded distant, muffled. The sonar screen blinked erratically. It wasn't just a single object anymore. There were many, all surrounding us, closing in like a storm of shadows. And the whispering, it wasn't just a voice anymore. It was a chorus, 100 voices woven together in a haunting melody of unknown origin. Get us out of here, Dr. Singh shouted, her calm veneer cracking for the first time since we began this descent. But the submersible wasn't responding. The sensors were fried, the systems glitching. We were helpless, caught in the middle of something far beyond our comprehension. Then, just as I thought we were going to plummet back into the depths, the submersible jerked to a halt. I looked out the porthole, heart pounding in my chest. There, in the inky blackness of the Mariana Trench, was something I could never have imagined. A wreckage. A ship, or what remained of it, broken and twisted beyond recognition. But it was no ship I'd ever seen before. Its design was foreign, alien in every sense of the word, with strange symbols etched into its surface. And the whispers, they were coming from inside it. We need to go, Dr. Carter said urgently, his voice tight with fear. Now. But it was too late. The submersible lurched once more, and this time I felt the unmistakable grip of something otherworldly take hold of us. The whispers rose in volume, a cacophony of voices from the wreckage that seemed to know our every thought, our every fear. In that moment, I realized the truth. Whatever had been watching us from the abyss had already decided we were never going to leave. The world outside the submersible had become an impenetrable void. The sonar was dead. The lights flickered and sputtered, casting the cabin in an eerie, unpredictable glow. For a moment, we just sat there in silence, staring at the wreckage outside, as if we were waiting for something to happen. But it was the silence that spoke the loudest, thick, suffocating, like the ocean itself was holding its breath. Are we stuck? Emily's voice trembled. Her fingers were still clutching the controls, but the submersible was completely unresponsive. I stared at the wreck through the porthole, trying to make sense of it. The ship, or whatever it was, loomed like a ghost in the dark, its twisted metal creaking softly in the currents. I couldn't see inside, but I could feel something watching us. Something waiting. We need to get back to the surface, Dr. Carter finally said, his voice strained. We've had enough. Whatever this is, it's not worth risking our lives for. I nodded, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. There was something down there, something that wanted us to stay. Something that was toying with us. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in the submersible, that it was with us. A sudden, violent jolt threw me from my seat, and the submersible shuddered like a frightened animal. I glanced around, eyes wide in panic, but no one else seemed to know what was happening. The lights went out completely. For a moment, we were swallowed by darkness. Then, a low hum filled the cabin, an eerie, rhythmic sound that pulsed through the walls of the submersible. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't from any of our equipment. It was alive, a hum that vibrated beneath my skin and rattled my bones. Something's wrong, Tom whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum. I don't think we're alone anymore. I turned toward him, heart racing. I couldn't see his face, but I could hear the tremor in his voice. His panic was contagious. And then it happened. A cold, damp pressure pressed against the hull of the submersible. Slowly, steadily, as if something massive was swimming around us, brushing against the metal, pushing against the walls. The scraping sound from earlier returned, but now it was sharper, more deliberate, as if claws were dragging along the outside. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to look out the porthole, even though every instinct told me not to. The faint glow of the submersible's emergency lights cast strange shadows on the wreckage, but that wasn't what caught my attention. It was the shape moving behind it. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, a trick of the mind, but then it moved again. Slowly, deliberately, a massive form swimming just beneath us. Its outline was indistinct, amorphous, but it was there. It was huge, far larger than anything I'd ever encountered, and it was circling us, like a predator sizing up its prey. "Do you see it?" I gasped, my voice barely above a whisper. But there was no response. I glanced around the cabin. Emily had her eyes locked on the control panel, hands frozen on the console. Dr. Carter's face was ashen, and Tom was shaking, his eyes wide with terror. And then I realized something even worse. They couldn't see it. They weren't reacting. It was as if the thing outside was only visible to me. Only I was aware of it. The hum intensified, and I could feel it vibrating through the floor beneath my feet. And that's when I heard it. A voice. No, not a voice, a scream. The kind of scream that tears through your mind, leaving nothing but raw terror behind. It echoed from deep within the wreckage, but it didn't sound human. It was distorted, inhuman, like the sound of metal grinding against bone. I jumped back, my heart hammering in my chest. "It's coming from the wreckage. Something is trapped in there." "Stop it, Alex." Dr. Carter's voice was strained. "You're imagining things. There's no one there. We need to focus on getting back to the surface." But I couldn't shake the feeling. Something had been left behind, something that shouldn't have been. The whispers, the strange hum, the phantom beneath the submersible, all of it pointed to one truth. The wreckage was alive. It was a tomb, a prison, and something was trapped inside, clawing at the walls, begging for release. Without warning, the submersible lurched again. This time it felt different. It wasn't the usual shake from the pressure. This was a force, a tug, as if something was pulling us downward. The hum grew louder, more insistent. The whispers filled my mind, echoing with words I couldn't understand. And in that moment, the realization hit me. The phantom beneath us wasn't just watching us, it was calling to us. It wanted us to join it in the growth. The submersible shook violently once more, a deafening crack of metal bending under pressure. I could feel the tension in the air. Thick, suffocating, as though the abyss itself was trying to consume us whole. I gripped the armrests so tightly that my knuckles were white, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. "We're not gonna make it, are we?" Emily's voice came through, barely a whisper, her eyes wide with panic. It's pulling us down." The hum, the low rhythmic vibration, had transformed into something else entirely. It was no longer just a noise. It was a presence, an invisible force pressing against us, shoving us deeper into the trench. The wreckage outside, that twisted, unnatural shape, seemed to loom closer, drawing us toward it with a magnetic pull. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I knew, deep in my bones, that whatever had been left behind in that wreckage wasn't just a ship. It was a warning, a tomb, a trap. "We need to go back," Dr. Singh said, her voice sharp but tinged with fear. "We can't stay down here any longer. The systems are failing." But the submersible didn't respond to her commands. It was as if the abyss itself had seized control. The lights flickered once more, casting strange, fleeting shadows on the walls of the cabin. Outside, I could make out the distorted shape of the wreckage in the murky depths, and this time, I saw movement. Something was inside. Something huge, something alive, was moving through the twisted metal. I could make out strange skeletal limbs, too many, too long, scraping against the walls of the ship. And there were eyes. Eyes everywhere. Hundreds of them, blinking in the dark, watching us. "We're not alone," I muttered, my voice trembling with a mixture of awe and terror. Whatever was in that wreckage, it's still down there, and it's not dead. The others were silent, but I could feel their eyes on me. I didn't know if they saw what I saw, but I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The abyss wasn't just a graveyard for ships and creatures. It was a place where things got trapped, things that should never be found again. The hum turned into a cacophony, a distorted chorus of voices rising from the depths. The whispers I'd heard before, that insidious language I couldn't understand, became louder, sharper, and more frantic. It felt as though they were calling to me, reaching into my mind, tearing at the fragile edges of my sanity. And then it happened. A voice, a real voice, broke through the static, clearer than anything I'd heard in the past hour. Turn back. It wasn't from any of us. It wasn't from the wreckage. It was something else, something ancient and powerful, coming from the deepest, darkest part of the trench. Turn back, or join us. The words echoed through the cabin, reverberating in my chest, so cold that it felt like ice was creeping through my veins. The message was clear. Whatever had been trapped in the trench, whatever horrors lay beneath, wanted us to stay. It wanted us to be part of the abyss, just like the wreckage, just like the countless souls that had been lost here before. My mind raced. I glanced at the others and I could see it in their eyes, the terror, the disbelief. They were all hearing it too. Join us. The voice was louder now, desperate, like a plea or a warning. And that's when I realized something even more horrifying. The voice wasn't just speaking to us, it was speaking to me. To me, specifically. It knew me. It knew my thoughts, my fears, my deepest secrets. It was calling me by name. I staggered back in my seat, my head spinning. I could feel my sanity fraying, unraveling. We need to leave. Now, we're not supposed to be here. But as I looked out the porthole again, I saw something I hadn't seen before. The wreckage wasn't just a ship. It was a gateway, a doorway into something far worse, a dark portal leading down into the blackness of the abyss. And something had been waiting for us to open it. The thing outside wasn't a creature. It was the abyss itself. And it was alive. Without warning, the submersible was yanked forward, a force so strong it felt as though the ocean was swallowing us whole. The hull groaned under the pressure, and I could feel the temperature drop, the water around us growing colder with each passing second. The hum was deafening now, a shrill noise that tore through my mind, and the voices, those damn voices, screamed for us to join them, to become part of the darkness. And then, as quickly as it had started, the force released us. The submersible was thrown back with a violent jolt. The shaking stopped, and for a moment there was only the deep, hollow silence of the trench. "We're free," Emily whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. But I knew better. The abyss had let us go, for now. But it wasn't finished with us, not by a long shot. "Get us back to the surface," Dr. Carter ordered, his voice hard, but I could hear the fear beneath it. Now, we ascended, and the trench's dark grip slowly loosened. But as we rose, I couldn't shake the feeling that the abyss was watching us. It was waiting, patient and cold. And sooner or later it would come for us again. It started as a routine night shift, just another day out at sea. I've been a Coast Guard operator for nearly 5 years, and you learn to distinguish between the usual distress signals and the ones that make your skin crawl. But this one? This one was different. It was just after midnight when the call came through. A distress signal, an SOS, the kind we've all heard 1,000 times, but this one carried an unusual tone. It wasn't the standard automated message, the kind that's clipped and mechanical. No, this one had a tremor in it, a desperation that I couldn't quite place. "Coast Guard, this is the Ocean Queen," the voice crackled, distorted by static. "We're taking on water. We need immediate assistance. I repeat, immediate assistance." The Ocean Queen was a cargo ship. Not an old one, but certainly not a new one either. Built over 40 years ago, but still in service, hauling freight across international waters. It was rare to hear from them unless they were in trouble, and even then, the distress signals were usually pretty standard. "We have a mechanical failure. Engine room flooded. Nothing to make you worry too much." But this was different. "Ocean Queen, this is Coast Guard. Please repeat your location. Over." I grabbed the mic, my fingers suddenly cold, the words escaping me with a slight shake in my voice. The voice on the other end hesitated, then came through again. We're drifting off course. No power. We're stuck. We can't move." The static surged, and I thought I heard something else, something faint, like a muffled scream in the background. "Please, hurry." The The transmission cut out, leaving nothing but the hiss of static in its place. I immediately patched through to the main control room and relayed the message. My supervisor, Lieutenant Walker, didn't seem alarmed. Not at first. He took the call, asked the usual questions about the ship's condition, and confirmed the location. "We'll have a boat out there within an hour," he said, and then added something that made my stomach tighten. "Get the radar online. Make sure we're tracking everything. The Ocean Queen isn't far, but if the weather's as bad as it looks, we'll need to stay sharp." I set to work, running through the necessary checks. We had a new radar system recently installed, and while I wasn't sure how effective it was in rough conditions, I trusted it more than my eyes at this point. The storm outside had picked up considerably in the last hour. The sky was dark and the sea churned violently. I glanced at the radar. There it was, just off the coast, not far from our station. The coordinates matched, and then something caught my eye. A blip. A second one, just to the west of the Ocean Queen. It wasn't normal. It didn't match the typical ship size. It was too small, too erratic. It appeared and disappeared too quickly, like something was moving with the ship, not far from it. I felt my heart skip a beat. "Lieutenant," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We've got another contact. It's not listed on the radar as a ship, but it's moving with the Ocean Queen. I can't get a solid lock on it." There was a pause on the other end. "What do you mean it's moving with them?" "I mean, it's following them. It's keeping the same pace, staying just off their port side." "Run a scan," Walker ordered. "Get more details. If it's a smaller vessel, it might be someone coming to help, but let's confirm first." I tapped in the coordinates and adjusted the radar, but the blip was gone. Just like that. No trace of it. I ran another sweep. Nothing. I looked back at the Ocean Queen's location. Still steady, still adrift. But my mind couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the SOS or the ship's strange position. It was something else. Something in the air, in the water, in the very stillness of the storm that made my skin crawl. The ship's last transmission kept running through my head. "We're stuck. We can't move." And the strange, muffled noise I had thought I heard in the background. It didn't sound like a mechanical issue. It sounded like someone was calling for help. Not the usual sort of cry for distress, but something far more unsettling. "Lieutenant, I don't think the Ocean Queen is alone out there." Before I could finish, the radio crackled again. The Ocean Queen was back on the line, but this time, the voice was different. It was distorted and the words were garbled. "Help? We're not alone." And then, the transmission was lost again. A chill ran through me. I had worked countless emergency calls, but something in that voice told me this wasn't like the others. Something was wrong, something that went beyond simple mechanical failure. "Get that boat out there now," Walker ordered, his voice suddenly sharp, the calm of moments before replaced with urgency. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. We were about to send a team into a storm, into the unknown. And something was telling me that the Ocean Queen wasn't the only thing lost out there. The radar blinked once more, and this time, the second contact appeared again, closer. And this time, it wasn't a small vessel, it was something much larger, something I couldn't identify. And it was heading straight for the Ocean Queen. The storm had escalated by the time the rescue boat was dispatched. Winds howled, and rain lashed against the windows of the control room. The radar pinged relentlessly, confirming the Ocean Queen's position as we tracked its movement through the churning sea. But the storm wasn't the only thing troubling me. That second contact, the one I couldn't identify, was still lingering in the back of my mind. It wasn't natural. It felt like it was waiting. We'd sent a team to the Ocean Queen on a smaller rescue boat, and I was glued to the monitors, watching as they approached the cargo ship. The storm was making everything difficult. Visibility was next to nothing, and the waves were getting dangerously high. I could barely make out the outline of the Ocean Queen, its silhouette lost in the dark. "Any word from the rescue team?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. Lieutenant Walker was pacing behind me, his brow furrowed. "Nothing yet. They should be alongside by now. I'll check in." But the moments dragged on and there was still no response. I tapped a few keys on the console to adjust the frequency, trying to reach the rescue boat. Static filled the air, the white noise almost suffocating. Rescue team, this is Coast Guard Control. Over. I spoke into the mic, my voice. But then faintly the voice returned, quieter this time. No crew. Empty. The ship, it's empty. I felt the blood drain from my face. Lieutenant? I turned toward Walker, my hands shaking as I gripped the mic. There's no one on board. The ship's empty. Walker's face hardened. We need to get a search team out there immediately. Do you have coordinates on the rescue boat? I tapped furiously at the console, trying to get a read on the location of the rescue boat. But when I brought up the tracking, it was blank. There were no readings. The boat had vanished from the radar. We lost contact with the boat too, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I can't. The radio crackled again, cutting me off. This time it wasn't the Ocean Queen. It was the rescue boat. But the voice wasn't coming from the crew. It was distorted, garbled, practically unintelligible. We don't see anyone. Don't know. Help. Empty. The words were slurred, as if the person speaking was half-conscious or delirious. The signal was fading, growing weaker and more fractured with each word. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the transmission cut off entirely. I stood frozen, my mind racing. The rescue team had disappeared. The Ocean Queen's crew was nowhere to be found. And the ship itself? There was something off about it. The empty vessel was drifting through the storm, abandoned, like it had been waiting for us to come. Or perhaps luring us in. Walker's eyes narrowed. We have to send another boat, now. But I began, but he cut me off. No, I'm going with this one. He didn't wait for my reply, already heading for the exit. I grabbed my jacket and followed him. We couldn't risk leaving the Ocean Queen without assistance for much longer, especially if the crew was missing. But something told me the storm wasn't the worst of our problems. I'd worked long enough in the field to know when something wasn't right, and everything about this felt wrong. The boat launched into the storm, cutting through the waves, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the Ocean Queen wasn't just stranded. It was waiting for something, or someone. As we approached, the silhouette of the ship loomed ahead, its dark shape barely visible through the downpour. I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. And when the boat finally came alongside the Ocean Queen, I thought I saw something flicker in the shadows of the ship's deck. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, some reflection off the rain-soaked metal. But then, I saw it again. A movement. Something in the windows. A shadow. There was something on board. I wasn't sure if it was the crew, if they'd come back somehow, or if it was something far worse. But the ship, the Ocean Queen, it wasn't empty. And whatever was on it had been waiting for us. The wind howled as the boat bumped against the side of the Ocean Queen, the sound of waves crashing against metal almost deafening in the howling storm. The rain fell in sheets, blurring the outlines of the ship, but even through the sheets of water, I could see that the vessel was eerily still. No movement, no lights. It was as though the ship itself had swallowed the crew whole, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. Lieutenant Walker and I, along with a small team of Coast Guard personnel, boarded the ship, our footsteps echoing unnervingly loud on the wet metal deck. The smell hit us first, a mixture of salt water, old machinery, and something faintly metallic that I couldn't place. The air was heavy, thick with something I couldn't identify. The storm outside seemed to amplify the isolation we felt, the darkness of the night pressing in from all sides. "Stay alert," Walker ordered, his voice steady but with an edge I hadn't heard before. He was trying to keep it together, but even he knew that something was very wrong. "Check the bridge first, we'll search the lower decks after." I nodded, though I could barely hear him over the storm. The ship seemed alive in the darkness, its empty halls whispering in the wind. The silence felt suffocating, oppressive. We moved quickly, our boots slapping against the damp flooring as we made our way toward the bridge. Every step felt like it took us further from the world we knew and deeper into the unknown. When we reached the bridge, the door was ajar. I pushed it open slowly, half expecting it to creak, but instead it swung open with ease. The inside of the bridge was just as I'd imagined. Dark, abandoned, untouched by human hands. The console screens flickered erratically, but there was no sign of life, no crew, no captain, just the cold, dead silence of a vessel stranded in the storm. Walker motioned for the team to spread out and begin searching. We didn't speak, our movements synchronized as we checked the various control panels and navigational equipment. It was clear that the ship had been abandoned in a hurry. Nothing was in order. Papers were scattered across the desks, and the chairs were left overturned. It was as though the crew had simply vanished in the middle of their tasks. "Anything?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Walker didn't look up from the console, his brow furrowed in concentration. "No signs of distress. The ship's logs are intact, but there's no record of a full crew. Just random notations about cargo deliveries and weather reports." "Wait," one of the officers called from the corner, crouching near a desk. "There's a note here. Looks like a personal message." I moved over, my curiosity piqued. The officer handed me a crumpled piece of paper, and I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, hurried. There was only one line. "The cabin with the locked door, don't go in, it's not what it seems." I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the words. It didn't make sense. Who would leave a message like that? And why would it specifically mention a locked door? I had a feeling we were being led somewhere, or warned away. Walker glanced at the note, his expression unreadable. "That's our next stop," he said flatly. "Let's move." We left the bridge, the weight of the note heavy on my mind. As we made our way through the dimly lit corridors, I felt a growing sense of unease. The ship was vast, too vast for it to feel so empty. Every turn we made, every hallway we passed, felt like we were retracing the same steps, as if the layout of the ship was slowly changing. The walls seemed to close in around us, the distance between each room growing longer and longer. We reached the door that had been marked on the ship's schematics, Cabin 17. It was tucked away in a far corner of the ship, almost as if it had been deliberately hidden. The door was a simple metal slab, weathered by years of salt water and neglect. But it was the lock that caught my attention. It was an old-fashioned lock, the kind that should have been easy to open with a simple key. But something about it was off. The keyhole was oddly distorted, as though it had been tampered with. There were strange markings around it, scratches that looked like they had been made with something sharp. "Give me a hand with this," I said to one of the officers, motioning to the lock. We worked together, trying to force the door open. But it wouldn't budge. There was something holding it shut, something stronger than any lock mechanism I'd ever encountered. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Something about this door made me uneasy. I glanced back at Walker, but he was standing a few feet away, his eyes narrowed as he scanned the hallway. "We need to get inside," Walker said. His voice was colder now, more insistent. Whatever's behind that door might be the key to understanding what happened here. We tried again, pulling and tugging at the door, but it was no use. It wouldn't open. It was as though the ship itself was keeping us out. Then, without warning, the door gave way. It didn't swing open smoothly, but jerked and groaned, as if something inside was resisting our efforts. I stumbled back, but the door had already creaked open enough for us to peer inside. At first it looked like any other cabin, basic, functional. A small bed, a desk, some shelves, but there was an overwhelming sense of wrongness in the air, like something had been disturbed. The room was too cold, too still, and yet it felt like the temperature dropped when we stepped in. I felt a shiver run down my spine. But it wasn't the cold that unsettled me. It was the overwhelming sense that we weren't supposed to be here. I glanced around, my eyes searching every corner, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. A rustling sound came from behind the desk, a soft, almost imperceptible noise. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned to Walker. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. "This is it," he whispered, as if speaking to himself. The cabin was empty, but the sense of unease deepened. The walls felt like they were closing in, and for a brief moment I could swear I saw something shift in the shadows. A shape, moving just beyond the corner of my eye, and then I heard it. Low, faint, but unmistakable. A whisper. "Don't go any further." The whisper echoed in my ears, the words impossible to ignore. I turned toward Walker, who stood frozen in place, his expression stricken with the same sense of dread that had settled into my chest. The room seemed to pulse with an unnatural heaviness, as though the very air was thick with the weight of unseen eyes. Something was deeply wrong here. We weren't alone on this ship, and whatever was lurking in the shadows wasn't human. I stepped further into the cabin, despite every instinct in my body screaming at me to turn and run. The door creaked shut behind me with a chilling finality, as though it too had been waiting for something. The whispers faded, but the silence that followed was even more suffocating. "Look at this," one of the officers, Miller, called from across the room. His voice was thin, strained. He was crouched by the bed, his flashlight flickering across the worn mattress. I approached cautiously, my boots making soft echoes on the floor. On the bed, there was a thin, yellowed sheet. Beneath it, I could see the shape of something, or someone, curled tightly beneath the fabric. A sense of revulsion twisted in my gut, but I couldn't look away. Miller took a deep breath, and with one swift motion, he pulled the sheet back. I gasped. A body. But it wasn't just any body. It was wrong. It was bloated, discolored, with skin stretched taut over the bones. The eyes were wide open, empty. There was no expression on the face, just an eerie, lifeless stare that seemed to see straight through me. The body had been dead for some time, but that wasn't what made it horrifying. It was the fact that it was perfectly preserved. Not a hint of decay. It was as though the body had been embalmed long after it should have rotted away. "Jesus," Miller whispered, stepping back, his hands trembling. "What the hell happened here?" I couldn't answer. The answer was clear, but it was too terrifying to voice. I felt an overwhelming sense of déjà vu, as if I had seen this exact scene before, in some twisted dream or memory. But there was more to the room. I forced myself to step back from the bed and scan the rest of the cabin. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows pulling at me. There were markings, strange symbols etched into the wood, scratches, gouges, and something more. A pattern. A ritual. I couldn't make out the details, but I knew I had seen similar symbols in occult books and ancient texts. Not that I had ever believed in that kind of thing, but this felt real. The air felt wrong, the very temperature of the room too cold, too unnatural. It wasn't just a haunted ship, it was a tomb. I moved toward the desk, instinctively reaching for the drawer. My hand hovered above it for a moment, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Something told me not to open it, that whatever was inside would be even worse than what we had already uncovered. But curiosity won out. I tugged at the drawer, and it slid open with an eerie smoothness. Inside, there was nothing but a small, faded journal. I picked it up, my fingers brushing over the cracked leather cover, the edges worn from years of handling. "Found something," I muttered almost to myself. "We need to take this back to the base." Walker was still staring at the body, his face pale as he swallowed hard. He didn't respond immediately, and when I glanced at him, I saw something in his eyes that chilled me to the bone. Fear. For the first time since we boarded the Ocean Queen, Walker seemed truly scared. "We need to get out of here," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the storm's fury outside. "Now." But as I looked around, I realized something. The door. It was still shut. I glanced over my shoulder at the others, and for the first time, I saw that the hall outside the cabin was empty. Completely, utterly empty. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Where's the team?" Walker's eyes darted to the hallway. "What do you mean?" I was already moving toward the door, panic beginning to claw at the edges of my mind. Something was wrong, so wrong. The crew had been with us just moments ago. I hadn't heard them leave. I hadn't seen them pass by. But now the corridor beyond the cabin was silent. Empty. "We need to get out now," I said again, this time with more urgency. My hand reached for the door handle, and just as I twisted it, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I spun around, but the cabin was empty. No one had come in. No one was standing behind me. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to Walker, but he was already moving toward the window, peering through the rain-smeared glass. His face was ashen, his expression distant. "Get away from the window," he snapped, his voice low and tense. But it was too late. I had already seen it. A figure, standing at the edge of the ship's deck, motionless like a shadow against the storm. It wasn't one of the crew. It couldn't have been. The figure was too still, too unnaturally rigid. And there was something wrong with the way it stood, like it wasn't quite human. Like it was just a shape, something that shouldn't have been there. Is that a person?" I asked, my voice trembling. Walker didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed my arm and yanked me away from the window. "Get away from the glass," he said urgently. "We're not alone on this ship." A wave of cold dread washed over me. I turned back to the door, but the moment I touched the handle, a deep, guttural groan shook the entire ship. The walls creaked, the ship itself seemed to lurch, and then, as if in response to some unseen force, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. I jumped back, heart racing, and that's when I saw it, written in the condensation on the inside of the glass, just barely visible. "Adrift with the dead." We were supposed to be the first team to dive to the deepest, most untouched part of the ocean. The part that even the most seasoned divers and submersible pilots had shied away from. The Mariana Trench. The so-called Challenger Deep. The abyssal frontier that had been shrouded in mystery and fear for centuries. No one had ever ventured this far. Not like we would. This was supposed to be a scientific marvel, an exploration of the unknown. The discovery of creatures and phenomena that no human had ever witnessed. The perfect mission, the ultimate challenge. But as our submersible descended into the crushing dark, I realized we weren't just diving into the unknown. We were diving into something far worse than anything I had imagined. Something that had been waiting, watching. Something that had always been there. We'd launched from the research vessel Endeavour, and the submersible, the Abyssal Voyager, was our lifeline. Our small team of 5 was a carefully selected mix of marine biologists, geologists, and technicians. We were all professionals, experts in our fields. But none of that mattered now. Not when the weight of the ocean pressed down on us, and the very air inside the submersible felt heavy with dread. It began as any other deep-sea dive would. At first, the journey was calm. The submersible cut through the water, lights illuminating the endless expanse of darkness below. We descended past the 10,000-meter mark, the lights from our vessel pushing back against the black void. The temperature dropped, and the pressure increased with every meter. But the ocean had always been like that, unchanging and unyielding. We were just visitors, small and fragile against its vastness. Dr. Sinclair, our lead marine biologist, was running calculations on the environment, his voice steady over the comms. "All systems normal," he reported. "We're approaching the final descent point. Maintain steady descent." The rest of the team murmured in agreement. I, too, was focused on the view outside the porthole. There was nothing to see but an impenetrable darkness that seemed to stretch forever, like the ocean was swallowing us whole. And then, without warning, the sonar pinged. It was a soft, almost indistinct echo at first, just a faint signal against the silence of the trench. But the signal was there. It didn't belong. "Did anyone else hear that?" I asked, my voice betraying the unease that had begun to crawl up my spine. "I heard it," replied Jake, our technician. "It's faint, though. Could be an anomaly." But it wasn't an anomaly. The sonar picked up something, a shape, moving slowly, almost methodically, at the edge of our detection radius. It was too large to be a typical marine animal, and too erratic in its movement. "It's coming toward us," Dr. Sinclair said, his voice tight. I glanced at the sonar, my stomach dropping. The shape wasn't just moving in random patterns. It was circling us, closing in with deliberate purpose. "We're too deep for this," Jake muttered under his breath. "Nothing this big should be down here." The lights on the Abyssal Voyager flickered. "What the hell was that?" I asked, leaning forward in my seat. I could feel the tension rising among the crew. Dr. Sinclair tapped the controls, trying to stabilize the submersible, but it was no use. The lights continued to flicker, and the sonar showed that the shape was growing closer, faster. "Brace yourselves," Dr. Sinclair barked as the submersible suddenly lurched, the entire vessel shaking as if something had brushed against it. The pressure outside was already intense at this depth, but this was different. It wasn't just the ocean. Something was pushing against us. I could hear the frantic beeping of the sonar as the shape grew larger. There was no mistaking it now. It was a creature. But it wasn't like anything we had encountered in the ocean before. The sonar readings were chaotic, distorted, as if the creature was alive in ways that defied logic. I glanced at the screens in front of me, but they went black for a brief moment before flickering back to life. On the porthole, I saw nothing but blackness, a void. But then, just for a second, something moved. I blinked, trying to focus my eyes. Something large, something massive, bigger than any whale or shark, moved in the darkness outside. Its outline was jagged and strange, with limbs or appendages that didn't look like anything from this world. And then the lights flickered again. "I see it," I whispered, my breath caught in my throat. Dr. Sinclair swore under his breath, his hands shaking as he tried to adjust the submersible's controls. "We need to ascend, now." But it was too late. The submersible lurched again, harder this time. A deafening sound filled the cabin, something like a deep, guttural growl mixed with the grinding of metal. The entire vessel groaned under the pressure, and I felt the unmistakable sense that we were being pulled, dragged by something powerful, something alive. The lights flickered once more, and this time, they didn't come back on. We were plunged into complete darkness. "Is everyone all right?" Dr. Sinclair's voice came over the comms, though there was a tremor in his words. "I'm fine," I said, though I could feel my heart racing. "But we need to get out of here." "We can't ascend," Jake said, his voice taut. "The systems are down. We're stuck." A low rumble vibrated through the submersible, and I felt a sickening pressure building all around us. Something was pushing us deeper, not letting us leave. My eyes strained in the darkness, but I couldn't see a thing. I could only feel it, the presence, the creature that was closing in on us. And then, from the dark abyss outside, I heard it. The sound of something massive, something monstrous, moving closer. A scraping noise, like claws dragging against the metal of the submersible. It was too late. Whatever had been lurking in the trench had found us. The abyssal voyager had ventured too deep, and it was about to find out that there are things in the ocean's depths that should never be disturbed. We should have known better. In the deep, where light from the sun cannot reach, nothing should glow. The glow outside the abyssal voyager wasn't natural. It wasn't from bioluminescent creatures or anything we had been trained to expect. This light was different. It pulsed, slowly, rhythmically, as though it was alive, like a heartbeat in the dark. I wasn't the first to notice it. Jake had been watching the screens, trying to get the submersible systems back online when he froze, his face drained of color. "Do you see that?" he whispered, almost to himself, as though afraid to acknowledge it out loud. He pointed a shaking finger at one of the sub's monitors. The glow was faint at first, but growing, spreading. It was too bright, too concentrated, like nothing that should have existed at this depth. I peered out the porthole, squinting into the pitch-black abyss. There it was, a soft, eerie light shimmering just beyond our reach. "Is it natural?" I asked, my voice unnaturally loud in the silence that hung in the submersible. Dr. Sinclair didn't answer right away. He just stared at the screen, his brow furrowed. No, it's not," he said after a moment, his voice tense, betraying the unease that had started to crawl into his mind. "It's too concentrated, too uniform. There's no way it's coming from a living organism." Jake was already pushing buttons on the control panel, trying to bring the subsystems back to life. "We need to move closer to it," he said, his voice tight with the thrill of discovery, or maybe desperation. I couldn't tell which. I turned toward the glow again. It was pulsing, like a slow wave rolling in from the ocean floor. The colors were indescribable, nothing like the bioluminescent creatures we'd studied. It was more intense, more unnatural. It seemed to call to us. "We don't know what it is," I said, but the words felt like they were meant for someone else. Everyone else seemed mesmerized by it. The light seemed to pull at the edges of our sanity, teasing and beckoning us toward it, urging us to go deeper, to find out what it was. Dr. Sinclair hesitated. We need to exercise caution. We don't understand the source of this. But it was too late. The desire to know, to understand, had already taken hold of us. The allure of the unknown, of discovering something no one had ever seen, was too strong to resist. Jake grinned nervously, his eyes gleaming in the dim cabin light. We've come this far. Why stop now? Reluctantly, Sinclair nodded. All right, move us closer. The abyssal Voyager hummed as Jake adjusted the thrusters, pushing us forward, closer to the pulsating light. Every movement of the sub felt like we were getting drawn into a gravitational pull, and the glow seemed to intensify as we neared it. My gut twisted with unease, but there was no turning back now. As we closed the distance, the light took shape, or at least I thought it did. It was no longer a distant point in the dark. It was a vast, undulating mass that stretched across the ocean floor. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The light wasn't from a single source. It seemed to be radiating from the very ground, like the ocean floor itself was alive. It wasn't like anything we had ever read about in our research. The glow was shifting, its intensity ebbing and flowing, like it had a rhythm of its own. There's something down there, I said quietly, almost to myself. It's coming from something huge. Dr. Sinclair's voice was low, almost a growl. Pull back. This isn't right. But the pull was too strong. I couldn't explain it, but the submersible seemed to glide forward as if drawn by an invisible force. Every instinct in my body told me to stop, to turn around, to ascend. But the glow, it beckoned. We were too close now. A sudden jolt shook the sub, snapping me out of my daze. It felt like we had hit something, but when I looked at the sensors, there was nothing solid in our path. What the hell was that? Jake muttered, frantically tapping the controls. The sub lurched again, harder this time, and then an explosion of light. For a split second, everything was blinding white. The glow around us erupted, illuminating the depths of the trench in a flash. It was like being caught in the heart of a storm. My heart was in my throat as I tried to adjust to the overwhelming brightness. The light seemed to consume everything, like the very air around us was burning. Shut it down! Sinclair shouted, panic edging his voice. We need to. The lights in the sub flickered violently, and for a moment, everything went dark again. The sudden silence that followed was deafening. My pulse was racing, and the darkness pressed in on me from all sides, but I knew something had changed. The glow wasn't gone, it was still there, pulsing in the distance. But it had shifted, faded from the white-hot intensity to a sickly green, as though something had taken root in the trench and was feeding off the energy. And that's when I saw it. In the faint light, just barely visible against the ocean floor, something stirred. A shape, dark and shifting. At first, I thought it was an optical illusion, a trick of the light, but then it moved again, unmistakable and real. It was massive, a giant form stretching across the abyssal floor like some primordial creature, its features obscured by the swirling darkness and light. There was no doubt now. This wasn't just some phenomenon, it was alive, and it was watching us. Get us out of here, I said, my voice shaking as the fear finally took root in my gut. The glow, the creature, everything about this place felt wrong. It felt like we were trespassing on something ancient and unforgiving, and the ocean wasn't going to let us leave without paying the price. Sinclair's face was pale, his hands gripping the controls with white-knuckled intensity. Jake, now? Get us back to the surface, now. Jake was already fighting with the controls, but the sub didn't respond. The systems were still offline. We were trapped. And I could feel it. Whatever was down there, whatever had drawn us in with its glowing lure, was closing in. It was coming for us. I should have known we were already too deep to turn back. I should have listened when the glow first appeared, when the subtle unease crept into my chest and wrapped itself around my thoughts. But we were explorers, driven by the thirst for discovery. We were no longer in control, though. Whatever force had drawn us into this abyss had already begun to show its true nature, and I could feel it closing in around us like a trap. The submersible abyssal Voyager groaned, the lights flickering intermittently, as Jake fought to regain control. Sweat dripped down his brow, his fingers moving frantically over the controls, but it was useless. The systems were down, the engines unresponsive. We were dead in the water, and the monster was out there, somewhere in the dark, following us. "We need to get to the surface," Dr. Sinclair's voice broke through the tension, but there was a note of panic in it now. "Jake, do whatever you can. We're sitting ducks down here." Jake's face was pale as he stared at the control panel. "I'm trying, Sinclair, but something's blocking the systems. It's like something's messing with the electronics. I can't get a full connection." I glanced at the sonar. The readings were erratic, jumpy, like a malfunction. But it wasn't a glitch. Something was in the water with us, something that was messing with the subsystems, deliberately. "Is it the creature?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Dr. Sinclair didn't answer, but his wide eyes told me everything I needed to know. He was thinking the same thing. Whatever was down here, it wasn't just a passive observer. It was hunting us. I looked out the porthole again, trying to make out any shape, any sign of movement. The trench was impossibly vast, its depth stretching far beyond the reach of our submersible's lights. But then I saw it. Faint at first, almost invisible against the black backdrop of the trench. A shape, shifting, undulating, like a shadow made of living darkness. It was moving toward us, slow at first, as if testing our defenses. But it wasn't the shape that made my heart seize in my chest. It was the feeling, the sensation that came with it, like a weight pressing down on my soul, smothering my breath. It wasn't just a creature of flesh and bone. This thing, whatever it was, felt ancient. It felt wrong. "Do you see that?" I asked, my voice tight. Jake cursed under his breath and leaned over the controls. "I see it." His hands gripped the sides of his seat. "It's getting closer." Sinclair's face hardened. "We need to ascend now. If it's already targeting us, we have no time to waste." Jake hit the emergency ascend button, but nothing happened. The sub remained motionless. I could feel the ocean's pressure closing in on us. A constant reminder of just how helpless we were. We were thousands of meters down, far beyond the safety of any rescue operation. The trench was like a tomb, and we were sealed in it. "We're stuck," Jake said, his voice trembling. "It's like the sub is anchored to the ocean floor. There's no way up." A cold shiver ran down my spine. We weren't stuck because of a malfunction. The creature was keeping us here, keeping us within its reach. It wasn't just the electronics that were affected. It was the entire sub, the very fabric of the vessel, as though it had been ensnared by some unseen force. And then, with a sickening jolt, I saw it more clearly. The creature's shapes, moved through the dark. It wasn't just one thing. It was a mass of twisting limbs and tendrils, far too many to count, stretching out like an ocean of flesh, sliding through the water with eerie grace. Its surface was slick and reflective, covered in strange, shimmering scales that seemed to absorb light and reflect it back in unnatural ways. One massive appendage, the size of a tree trunk, slithered toward the submersible, brushing the hull with a soft scraping sound. The sub lurched again, as though the creature had pressed itself against us. The whole vessel trembled, the lights flickering again, as though they too were being pulled into the creature's grasp. And then I heard it. A sound, like a low hum, a vibration so deep it rattled my bones. It was coming from outside, from the creature itself. It wasn't just a physical sound, it was a frequency, a vibration that seemed to resonate within my very being, like it was speaking to me, calling to me in a language I couldn't understand. My head spun, and for a moment I couldn't tell if I was hearing the hum or feeling it. "Do you feel that?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "I'm feeling it," Jake whispered back, his voice tight. "What the hell is that thing?" Dr. Sinclair leaned forward, staring intently at the sonar, his face pale and drawn. "Whatever it is, it's not natural. It's not of this world." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The creature was closing in, its mass enveloping us, dragging us deeper into its web. The sub groaned, the metal bending under the pressure. And then, in a sudden burst of motion, I saw a tentacle. No, not a tentacle. More like a claw, but massive, almost impossibly large, shoot out from the darkness. It slammed into the side of the sub, sending a shockwave through the vessel. I stumbled, crashing into my seat as the sub spun out of control, the thrusters sputtering uselessly. "We're losing control," Jake shouted. "It's tearing us apart from the outside." I gripped the armrests, my knuckles white, trying to steady myself as the sub lurched violently. I could hear the scraping again, louder now, as though the creature's claws were raking along the hull. The pressure was too much. The lights flickered and went out completely, plunging us into darkness. For a long moment there was nothing but the sound of my own breathing, sharp and panicked. And then, just as quickly, the glow came back. But it wasn't the soft, pulsing light from before. It was brighter now, a sickly green light that seemed to shine through the metal of the sub, illuminating the depths outside as if the creature had become one with the ocean floor itself. The hum, the vibrations, they grew louder, overwhelming. And in that moment I realized the horrible truth. The monster was not just following us, it was feeding on us, on our fear, on the sub itself. It was slowly, deliberately, pulling us into the dark maw of the trench, its prey. And we were trapped. The sub groaned under the pressure, the metal creaking and bending as if it were made of paper rather than steel. My heart hammered in my chest as the low hum reverberated through my bones, a constant reminder of the creature that was waiting just outside. We were trapped in the belly of the beast now, and there was no escape. Jake was silent, his hands frozen on the controls as though he had given up. I couldn't blame him. The weight of the situation was suffocating. The systems were completely fried. There was no way to call for help, no way to signal to the surface. We were 1,000 meters down, and even if we somehow managed to ascend, we would never outrun whatever hunted us. Dr. Sinclair was staring at the sonar screen, his face pale and slack. The readings were wild, chaotic. Nothing made sense anymore. It was as though the very laws of nature were bending around us, and that sickly green glow still pulsed through the depths, casting its eerie light over the wreckage of our sub, making everything feel wrong. The creature hadn't retreated. It was still out there, circling us, waiting. The pressure in the cabin was unbearable now, a heavy, unrelenting force that seemed to squeeze all the air from my lungs. I could feel my mind starting to unravel, a slow spiral into madness as the seconds dragged by. "Jake," I managed to croak, my voice barely more than a whisper. Can you hear me?" He didn't respond. His hands shook as they gripped the controls. I couldn't tell if he was even aware of me anymore. He had retreated into himself, lost in the same horror that gripped all of us. I turned to Dr. Sinclair. He was still staring at the screen, his eyes wide with disbelief. His voice, when he spoke, was hoarse, like someone who had just awakened from a nightmare they couldn't shake. "We're not alone," he muttered, almost to himself. "This thing, it's not from this world. It's ancient, and it's been here longer than any of us could ever understand." I swallowed hard. "What is it? What the hell is it?" He didn't answer at first. Then, slowly, he turned to face me, his eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. "I don't know," he whispered. "But I think we've disturbed something. Something that's been waiting here, hidden in the dark." The lights flickered again, casting the cabin in brief flashes of light and shadow. The creature was toying with us now, playing with its prey. It knew we were helpless, knew we couldn't fight back. It was feeding on our fear, drawing closer with each passing moment. The sub lurched again, a violent shake that threw me against the wall. My stomach lurched as I struggled to regain my footing. Outside, I could hear the scrape of claws again, closer this time, closer than I had ever heard it before. "It's coming," I breathed, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. "It's coming for us." Dr. Sinclair's face had gone ashen. He looked at me, his eyes hollow. "If it wants us, it will take us. We're not getting out of here, not unless we can stop it." "Stop it," I repeated, incredulous. "How the hell are we supposed to stop that thing?" There was no answer. There was nothing we could do. The creature was far too powerful, and we were nothing more than helpless, trapped insects beneath its gaze. A sudden thought struck me, cold and terrible. What if it's not just hunting us? What if it's been doing this to everyone? Dr. Sinclair's eyes widened, and I could see the realization hit him. "The other ships," he murmured, "the ones that disappeared, they didn't just get lost. They were pulled down here like us, but for a purpose. We weren't the first to stumble upon this, and we won't be the last." The weight of those words crushed me. The others, the countless ships that had gone missing in this trench, their crews swallowed by the abyss, Had they all met the same fate? Were they still down there, waiting to be consumed, just like us? Suddenly, there was a loud thud, followed by a sickening scrape against the sub. The whole vessel rocked violently, and for a moment, I thought we were going to break apart. I scrambled for the emergency oxygen mask, heart pounding in my throat. "Hold on," I shouted. "We need to get out of here now." But even as I spoke, I knew it was futile. We were too far down. The sub was too damaged. The creature was too strong. Whatever it wasn't interested in our escape. It wanted us trapped here, stranded in its domain, where we would either become its next meal or be driven mad by the isolation and terror of the deep. The lights flickered one last time, and for a brief moment, the whole trench was illuminated. I saw it then, right outside the porthole, its monstrous form hanging in the water, its many eyes reflecting the glow of the sub's dim lights. 1,000 limbs, each one covered in barbed spines, stretched toward us. It was not a creature of the sea. It was something older, something that had crawled from the dark void of the ocean's depths to claim what was rightfully its own. And it had set its sights on us. I was no longer sure if I was screaming or if the sound was just in my head. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, the pressure of the ocean and the terror of the unknown pressing in from every side. Then, just as suddenly, everything went quiet. The lights died. The hum stopped. The sub stopped rocking. I could barely hear my own breath. And in the suffocating silence, I realized I was the only one left.
Stories may end, but the fear remains. Subscribe to uncover more secrets hidden in the darkness. Until we meet again in the world of nightmarish shadows.